Well, Sri Lanka will be hosting the 16th World Export Development Forum for the first time next week. And Sri Lanka has also become the first South Asian country to host this forum. Well, this comes at a very crucial time given that our export market is at a slow growth rate. And also to discuss about this and to discuss about how important the forum is at this juncture, we've got chairperson of the Sri Lanka Export Development Board, Mrs. Indra Malwatha, with us. Thank you very much for joining us. Well, first up, let's just talk about how important this forum is for Sri Lanka at this juncture.
Yeah, the one thing is holding the forum in Sri Lanka gives a message to the world that we are a country ready to open for business with the international community. As you stated very correctly, our export figures have not been doing well. But we cannot look at the export figures. We have to prepare our SME sectors and the exporters to face the challenges that they have to in the global market. So this forum has a number of topics that will be brought to their doorstep. Because it's an international forum, so it doesn't benefit only the Sri Lankans, but we have 496 international participants also registered. Our target was 300, and we are extremely happy that we have been able to get this large number of delegates, as well as very reputed speakers with reference to the international trading community.
Well, the Sri Lanka Export Development Board itself is recognized as a monitor, promoter and a policy maker, and also an advisor for the government when it comes to advising the government into what policies it should make and what direction it should take in the economic sector and the export sector itself. Well, will this forum give us a platform as a mediator, or will it actually make us an active actor or a participant in this forum?
Yeah, with reference to Sri Lankan context, I would say that I think we are showing an excellent example of private-public sector partnership, where we are, as a group, the steering committee comprises of the leading chambers as well as the Export Development Board professional officers, and we are working together. I think this may be one of the first occasions that the EDB itself is working so closely with the private sector. It was a challenge. It was a big decision that I had to take to invite the private sector and the members of the chambers to hold hands with the EDB for a national venture, and I think this could set a pace for all other events that will be undertaken. Certainly the EDB will be always consulting the private sector, which we have been anyway doing, because whenever we do our budgets, the plans, the stakeholders are always the private sector, because they are the beneficiaries. The EDB is there to formulate, help them and get them through the difficulties that they may have faced in exporting. So the stakeholder of the private sector working along with the EDB becomes very relevant.
Well, it's interestingly enough, you mentioned about the SMEs and how important this forum is for the SMEs. Could you please elaborate on that?
For example, if I look at the program of activity that has been drawn up, the first day, which is something special we have asked for Sri Lanka this time, we are having B2B meetings where we have almost 160 companies matched, and they are not just companies who are just flying into Sri Lanka, but they know whom they are coming to meet. Their requirements have been met, so that they are very targeted. This is just the first day's work, and then we have also organized a series of seminars and workshops, so that it benefits not only the forum delegates, but we open it up for other Sri Lankans to attend. For example, we have titled on entrepreneur development. Then we have exporting to Finland, exporting to Poland. So those topics are all on the sideline. So that will be something that will be very beneficial. Then when it comes to the forum itself, some of the topics that are being taken are very, very current, which our export community should be aware of. Now, for example, the first case we have is when regional blocks cross oceans. You have the trading blocks. The most current one that has come is the TPP. And if you see, most of our competing countries are party to the TPP. So where does Sri Lanka survive with something like that? How do we get ourselves geared up to meeting those challenges? So this is one area which will be discussed. Then, for example, another is trade facilitation and logistics in regional integration. You can have the best product, the best quality, but if you don't have trade facilitation, if you have non-tariff barriers when you have to enter markets, all the product is useless then. So trade facilitation becomes key, and this becomes very relevant to the SME sector. They are not big enough to sort it out themselves. So it is an organization like the Export Development Board with other relevant government departments who can simplify those procedures. Another topic that is being discussed is digital doors to trade. Now that is the in thing where e-commerce will play a very important role in future trade aspects. And again, when you look at the SMEs, this is one way they can start business. Once they develop a good product with a good design and all the standards are met, the next issue is how do I enter export market. So it's the e-platform is something that they can advertise their products and get to know some of the buyers. Of course, later on you have to meet face to face the buyers, but you don't have to spend a colossal sum of money at the initial stages to get a feel of what your product is when it's been exported. Standards is another topic that is being discussed, which is very vital because some of the countries don't demand standards now where we are exporting to, but it will be a matter of time where everybody looks at standards. For example, if you are exporting something like fruit and vegetable, they will definitely want to know whether they are GAP certified. Good agriculture practices have been practiced there, because there could be heavy weedicides, pesticides being used on in the stage of growing, and you have to have the minimum residue levels that should be certified. So then people become aware of safe food. So this will be relevant not only when you are exporting, but people growing in Sri Lanka, all of us will be the beneficiaries, because if they start practicing something like GAP.
Well, since you mentioned about agriculture and e-commerce, how practical is it going to be to get to the bottom of things, get to the root of things, get to the bottom layer of the market sector?
Yeah, now, for example, GAP. Sri Lanka is the EDB along with the Chamber of Commerce and the WTO and ITC have worked on a program to introduce good agriculture practices to our rural farmers. Initially, the agriculture instructors have been trained on it, and through them it will be given to the farmers. The farmers also have formed clusters, and now they realize that what good agriculture practices are, because unless you start it from the time you get your soil ready for planting to the seeding up to the point of harvesting, unless you practice right throughout, at the harvest time there is no way of correcting it.
Well, Sri Lanka is heavily dependent on primary products. How important it is for us to improvise in the sense to add a little bit of value rather than exporting everything in bulk, especially in the tea industry. How important is it? I would recommend that you hold your thought, because we might go into a short commercial break right now, and we will have the answers on the other side of this break. Well, you are watching Biz in Focus. I'm Stephanie Lazarus. Well, before the break, we spoke about how Sri Lanka is heavily dependent on primary products and how important it is for us to really improvise our primary products, add value to it, and even stop or even control bulk export, especially in the tea sector. If you can maybe explain to us how exactly
let
it
me
could be done.
talk of a more positive note. On the when people talk of the primary sectors, you talk of tea, rubber, coconut. Classic example is the rubber sector, where now over the past 15 years, where the primary export of rubber has been completely got on to value-added products. There isn't almost 98% of the rubber exported from Sri Lanka goes in value-added forms, in the form of solid tires. I think Sri Lanka has to be very proud because of the international market. Over 30% of the solid tire market is from Sri Lanka. Surgical gloves, rubber mats. So like that, there's a whole series of products that Sri Lanka is now doing, adding value in the rubber sector. Actually, this should be the scenario in the other two also. If you take the coconut, they're now going in for virgin coconut oil. That's a buzzword in the international market. Then the coconut water, so and desiccated coconut, and all that goes into the manufacturing. So we are gradually moving in, and the EDB is very actively promoting the value addition in products. Another thing that we want to move away from the primary thing is we are going into the global value chain. Where can Sri Lanka enter the global value chain? Again, if you take example of the rubber sector, can we do a little spare part or something for the automotive industry using our natural rubber? Can we use our natural latex and do something for the medical devices? We would not be able to manufacture the car immediately in Sri Lanka, but can we supply those parts to a car assembly where we get into assembly operation? So these are things that we are trying to encourage our exporters. And in fact, we have a number of schemes that have been developed for them to develop their supply. And now, for example, you take tea. We are looking at more branding. Should we not brand more companies and have more international companies coming out of Sri Lanka? So we have a branding program where indeed EDB initially assists some of these companies, and I must say some of the big brands that are now there in the international market were all initially assisted by the EDB. So we are reviving those programs, especially for homegrown brands.
Well, ma'am, do you think that we need a change of strategy when it comes to having our own model, own economic model? Should we maybe alter it to match the time and age, especially given that we are located in a very strategic location? Sri Lanka is in the center of everything. Why don't we kind of push this mechanism forward by making our own mechanism, our own model to our own location rather than following a different model of a different country itself?
In fact, now we are working along with the Harvard University. We are trying to look at how do we diversify the market, do we look at new products. Another example I could give you is we are very strong in our apparel sector. We are very strong in the apparel sector, but we have competition now coming from Vietnam and Bangladesh, who have certain concessions which Sri Lanka does not enjoy because we are now a middle income group. So we cannot extend that kind of assistance that is being given to the apparel manufacturers of those countries. Now, can we use those skills and get on to some other product? For example, bags. The children carry the backpacks. Can we get into products like that? Now we have identified backpacks is something that we can enter the US market because there is a special concession given for those. So we have to identify what are the skill set we have in Sri Lanka and how do we match those skill sets, upskill those products and get into new products. So those are being identified, and I'm sure within the next year or so we will have a new set of products that will come out. We're looking at pharmaceuticals. Can we do the pharmaceuticals? The Sri Lankan market is limited. On the other hand, we have a large quantity of imports coming into Sri Lanka. But can we do the pharmaceuticals and export it to new countries like Africa and places like that? Then again, we are concentrating on services. Sri Lanka has a very good construction industry, and we are looking at to see whether could we take construction across to, for example, Myanmar. Now EDB had a mission, and we had 10 companies going, and they were able to secure to do construction projects. Now those are of export of services, because we have to use the skill set here. We have educated youth here. How do we use them? So ICT is another sector that EDB is actively promoting with SLASCOM, with the private sector. Again, that's a beautiful relationship between the private sector and the government sector, where we could use our youth and get them to look and start on startups from Sri Lanka, where they have very good ideas, but they don't have the necessary financial support, where we will assist the companies, and if there is a good project which they could improve, the EDB along with SLASCOM and other organizations will help them to set up their businesses.
So do you see any progress in numbers, as in?
Oh yes, now you look at the ICT sector, now they have, within the last few years, they are hoping to reach a $10 billion exports, which were, now if you compare tea, which was there for 150 years, they've been struggling to get these exports going. And it will be a knowledge-based industry that we will be using.
Well, in this backdrop, do you think it's important for us to go ahead with ECTA, knowing that ICT sector is doing quite well?
Yeah.
Do you think it's good for us to even think about ECTA?
I think there's a misconception about ECTA. It is not that the floodgates are being opened for every professional or anyone to come into Sri Lanka. It will be project-based. It will be project-based, where there will be certain skill sets that we may not have in Sri Lanka. Maybe at the higher management level, where we can benefit by it. So it will be opened up. Whenever it does, will be for very limited amounts needed, where we don't have the skill sets in Sri Lanka. Now, for example, you take underwater welding. We have very limited underwater welders in Sri Lanka, and that is inhibiting the growth of shipbuilding in Sri Lanka. They have large orders, but we don't have the skilled people.
But is outsourcing the answer for it? Do you think that training and promoting our own...
No, whilst training and promoting, we can't wait for the very skilled people to come out in a very short period. So whilst it has to be done concurrently, whilst you do the training with our own people, we should be able to, are we going to say no to those export orders? Export earnings is extremely important for our country. Are we going to wait till all that is in place and not do our export order? Because the rest in the shipbuilding industry, the infrastructure is there. If it is just a few skill sets that we don't have, should we not get the skill set and of course work along with our own people? And then we will get the skills with us. So I think there's a big misconception on this, that everybody, it's an open thing that everybody, so it will be project based. It will be project based and based on what the private sector wants.
But ma'am, once the agreement is signed by the two nations, there's no going back, because there is going to be a duration in which they will give their assistance and we will have to get their assistance, and it should be on an agreement basis. So once the deal is struck, there is no going back. So do you think at this juncture, when Sri Lanka is actually going ahead in a different direction, where developing and nurturing our own market is being given priority, do you think at this juncture it's a good idea for us to go ahead with it?
As I stated earlier, it's on a project basis. It's just not going to be opened up just signing a treaty or whatever it is. In any treaty there are conditions. There are conditions which will be amicable to both countries. So nothing will be done which will damage the Sri Lankan industry. That you can be assured, nothing will be done. So it will only add to our wealth of knowledge that we have to improve it, and in certain sectors where we don't have the skill sets, and just get those skills so that we can get into the export market. It's a shame because we have the rest of the infrastructure in certain sectors, but we don't have certain skills. So why are we depriving ourselves of getting good foreign exchange to our country? It's just because of some skills. So I don't think anybody should be this thing that it's just going to be opened up.
Well, with that, let's head into another short commercial break, and we'll see you on the other side of Biz Info. Well, it's the second half or the quarter of Biz in Focus. We were talking about the World Export Development Forum that's going to be held from the 12th. That is going to be a 2-day forum where, as you mentioned earlier, there will be a number of countries from around the world that will join hands with Sri Lanka in promoting and investing in Sri Lanka and even developing the market here. Well, the Sri Lanka Export Development Board is playing a very key role in this forum itself, where it's attempting to promote and nurture the Sri Lankan market. And also, just in that backdrop, is it important that we develop the entrepreneurial skills of people, training them and nurturing them? Do you think it's vital for our economy?
It is, because I think entrepreneurship is something we are a little weak. We don't take those major jumps into certain things. So, in fact, this forum, one of the topics is on entrepreneurship development, and especially targeting the young. And along with that, as I said, we have this business startup program which EDB is now implementing, for which we have shortlisted 100 people. And that is something to develop the entrepreneurs, in the sense, as I said, they have bright ideas, but they may not have how do you do a project report, how do you get a bankable project report, how do we keep our accounts, how do we look at export markets. So this program will certainly help. And at the forum, they are all very world-renowned people in this business, and who have nurtured young people and young entrepreneurs who are sharing their knowledge, which will be very beneficial for the young people who are attending. Again, this, we are not only having it for the forum, on the sidelines. On the first day, we are having a seminar on this, so that additional people could benefit by these international delegates who are coming to Sri Lanka.
Ma'am, do you identify a potential sector that needs that extra push?
Certainly. It's we are looking at food processing. As I said, in the rubber sector, we are looking at how do we plug into the global value chain by doing the automobile industry, looking at the medical devices. Then I must also mention, along with this, we have the ship and boat building exhibition, which we are very proud. Again, it's out of the South Asian countries. Sri Lanka is the only one who is hosting it. And we have organized all the delegates to end up on the last day at the ship and boat building exhibition, which has been held at the COVID, which will give them a perspective that Sri Lanka is not just doing the tea, rubber, coconut, and that we are capable of going into more big industrial products. So this whole opportunity of getting everybody into Sri Lanka will to give a word of confidence to the business community that Sri Lanka is open for business. Sri Lanka is not just the exporter of the primary products, for which we have organized a mini exhibition of our top 40 exporters who will be exhibiting alongside the forum, which will show the quality certified products that Sri Lanka is capable of.
Well, talking about cooperation, I think we should touch on the SAARC region and how important it is for us to focus on other agreements, other regional cooperation or international organizations that could really help Sri Lanka to head in the right direction. Given that the SAARC is non-operative at this moment, at this juncture, free trade agreements are at a limbo. We are not really reaping the benefits of regional agreements or even trade agreements. Do you think that we should make a bid to enter ASEAN?
In fact, this is why the market access to the Indian market. We have a free trade agreement, and that's why we are trying to see how best we can make use of the free trade agreement with India. We have a free trade agreement with Pakistan. We are also actively working with Pakistan, even if SAARC doesn't work for whatever reason, that we work more bilateral with India and with Pakistan. We are also working on entering to a free trade agreement with Singapore, also with China, and then to a more business dialogue with Japan. with the US. So it's not that if the block doesn't work, still we are trying to see how best we could working with Singapore means you enter the ASEAN market there, because Singapore is a ASEAN market. So if we cannot get direct there, how best do we do? Because getting into these blocks are not very easy. It's very time consuming. Many years of negotiations go to get into a trading block. So I think we had done the best choice of trying to dealing with Singapore and trying to get a free trade agreement with Singapore. Then it opens up the whole ASEAN market for us.
Are we taking any steps in order to?
Oh, certainly. Our ministry is the Minister of Development Strategies and International Trade is very active in doing the.
So is ASEAN in the near future going to be one of those blocks with
not ASEAN per se, but entering agreement with Singapore, which is a country of the ASEAN bloc. So that opens up the market for you. If there's collaboration between our two countries, we produce there, we produce in Sri Lanka, and we do the marketing too, then it enters the export market. For example, now we encourage people to come and invest in Sri Lanka looking at the Indian market. That is to make use of the FTA that Sri Lanka has with India. So when they start manufacturing in Sri Lanka, they automatically have free access to the Indian market.
Well, thank you very much for joining us, Mrs. Indira Malvatta. It was a pleasure having you with us on Biz in Focus. Well, thank you very much for joining us as well. You can watch us next week, same time, same place. Good night.